What is up, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls? Episode 16 of the Be Great podcast coming at you now. And oh man, do we have a lot to talk about. It's funny. What did I say on Friday? I said that typically when we have one of these college football slates that looks lesser than, that looks boring, looks like a bunch of blowouts, that typically that means chaos will ensue. And oh boy, did it ever. I first would just like to say a quote that Kirby Smart said. I was it over the off season? I think it was over the off season. Kirby Smart had a quote, and it applies really well to what happened this past weekend. And the quote was, in the SEC, humility is just a week away. Think about that for a second. And then think about what happened on Saturday, because the two main games I'm going to talk about should be obvious. And it applies really well to these two teams and to these two fan bases. Humility is only a week away. And oh boy, did Alabama and Tennessee learn that the hard way. And technically Missouri as well. But we'll get to Missouri later. But right now, I want the focus. I want the spotlight to be on Alabama and Tennessee, because I learned a lot of things on Saturday. And some of them, maybe they're hot takes, but I don't care. I was so satisfied with what I watched on Saturday. First and foremost, let's get to Alabama somehow, some way. I feel like this is an alternate reality. It's an alternate universe. Lost to Vanderbilt. Even saying it, I can't help but smile. What does it tell me? What does it tell me? Does it tell me that Vandy is really good? Not necessarily. I think what it tells you is that Alabama put everything into beating Georgia last week. That is all they cared about. That was their Super Bowl. Alabama's Super Bowl was beating Georgia. And congrats, you did it. And the joy of beating Georgia lasted a week, because then you went and got chopped in half by Vanderbilt. And, it's interesting how narratives flip so easily. What was the narrative after the Georgia game? Oh, Kalen DeBoer, he's the next Saban. There's no drop off. Oh, he's the next. He owns college football. He's the next king of college football. And now what's the narrative? Kalen DeBoer needs to be fired. He's not going to last long. He needs to be taken to task. It's just so interesting how quickly narratives can change. And then Tennessee. What this one, honestly, I don't think. Okay, let me just restructure what I was about to say. If you are not listening to this podcast and listening to everything that is coming out of my mouth and believing it, look, am I always right? Of course not. No one is. But boy, did I hit the mark on Tennessee. What have I said for the past 2 weeks about this team? What have I said? The past 2 weeks, I have said that Tennessee has not been impressive. I said that if Oklahoma had their backup in for the entire game, that game might look quite a bit different. And the win against NC State is not impressive. And I don't care that you scored 60 before half against Kent State. Who cares? And then what happens? You go against a team with a pulse, and oh, shocker, Nico isn't the second coming. Nico isn't the next Peyton Manning. He looks like I don't know, freshman, like a first-time starter. What blows my mind? You're telling me Tennessee won't score 70 against everybody? I can't believe it. Oh, but I can because I've been saying it. What happened to Tennessee is the exact same thing that happened to Ole Miss last week. You go against someone and you get a little bit of adversity, and what happens? You fold like a lawn chair. Like a lawn chair. You fold like a napkin at a fancy restaurant. I mean, I wish I could say it was shocking, but I've been saying this. And no, people don't want to listen. Oh, Nico for Heisman, he's just the best. He's a mixture of Mahomes and Lamar Jackson. He's just the best ever. Okay. And then Mizzou, I mean, Missouri acted like they weren't even there. They might as well have not been there. I mean, and don't start with me. No, Texas A&M is not in contention to go to the SEC championship or to win the SEC. No, I think it was just a Missouri team that was quite simply exposed for being fraudulent. That's what I think that was. As good as Luther Burden is, and he is good, he's great. His team's not great. Brady Cook is good, not great. The offensive line, weak, soft. Defensive line, weak, soft. Made Connor Wegman look like a star. And trust me, he's not. A lot of SEC darlings got exposed. And ironically, I wanted to get on here. After the Georgia Auburn game, I wanted to be upset. And I wanted to come on here and rant about how I'd still, even after a 31-13 win, I did not like everything. I did not like a lot of what I saw from UGA. And then it was like after the Georgia Auburn game ended, chaos just ensued. Obviously, the Missouri Texas A&M game had already happened, but you could convince me a world where Texas A&M destroys Missouri. I can see that. But once the Georgia Auburn game ended, we had Vandy upset Bama. And if you told me that was going to happen, I would have had you drug tested. You had Arkansas beating Tennessee, which, again, you could convince me of a world, but I would still highly doubt it. You had Michigan lose to Washington. You had USC lose to Minnesota. You had Miami, who we'll get to probably towards the end. I'm sick and tired of the refs saving Miami. This is the second week in a row. They should have 2 losses right now. It's embarrassing. It's honestly embarrassing, but we'll get to that. And then as the day went on with all this chaos, I felt better and better about Georgia's performance. Because I wanted it to be more dominant than it was. But at least we didn't lose to Vanderbilt. At least we didn't lose to Arkansas. At least we didn't lose the game. At least our only loss this season is to a top 5 team, although now they're number 7. At least we don't have a loss to an unranked Vanderbilt, an unranked Arkansas, an unranked Kentucky. And I think that just shows that I think that shows the difference. It shows the difference. Alabama cared so much about beating Georgia. That they cared so much about it, and it shows. Congrats, you beat Georgia. What did you? You clearly didn't care enough about beating Vanderbilt. You clearly took them lightly. And I'm gonna just say this now: Nick Saban is still your head coach. There's no way you lose to Vanderbilt. Absolutely no way. Not even possible. I, I just, it's shocking. I'm still in shock from what I witnessed. Michigan, I am not gonna lie. I am probably one of the happiest people on this planet of seeing Michigan's downfall. It is quite satisfying to see Michigan's downfall because they deserve it. Congrats, you won a national title that no one outside your own fan base thinks is legitimate. And now look at you. You have zero offense. Your offense looks worse than the Pittsburgh Steelers. And that's bad. You can barely complete a forward pass. Orgy got benched. And it couldn't happen to a more fraudulent group of individuals. USC lost to Minnesota. Yeah, USC, welcome to the Big Ten. Welcome to the Big Ten. You lost to Michigan, and that loss is looking worse and worse as the weeks go on. And now you just lost to Minnesota. I've been saying this for years. Obviously not on this podcast because this podcast hasn't been a thing for years. But I knew ever since when Lincoln Riley was at Oklahoma, I was calling this man a fraud. He's never won a big game in his life. Congrats, you've gotten your quarterbacks to have Heismans. Congrats. That's an individual award. How about your team? You've never won a big game, and since you've gotten to USC, you've been trash. Plain and simple. And I have no sympathy for USC, for Lincoln Riley, none. You're getting paid a boat ton of money to be mediocre. And he might be coaching for his job. Because I would imagine USC is not too happy that they are so mediocre and they're paying you all this money and giving you all this stuff. So I can imagine he might be coaching for his job. And then Miami should have lost to Virginia Tech, should have lost to Cal. But the refs want to save them, I guess. They want to pick up a targeting for whatever the reason. It was flat out targeting, but okay. And then on their game-winning touchdown, they had 2 offensive linemen who were illegal men downfield. And they weren't just illegal men downfield. They were practically in the end zone. And for those who want to say, oh, that doesn't matter, that wouldn't have changed. First of all, when a linebacker sees 2 offensive linemen coming upfield practically to the end zone, that's telling them it's a run, even though it was a pass. So it changes how the linebackers react to the play. That's why it's important, you know? So, just another complete bailout. And that's fine. Because, at the end of the day, Miami's going to lose eventually. It's going to happen. Let me see if I can pull up their schedule real quick. Of course, I have to stop just typing in Miami's schedule because it keeps pulling up the Dolphins. Trust me, no one cares about the Dolphins. They avoid Clemson in the regular season. I think Louisville could give them a hard time this weekend, although Louisville's been a little disappointing. Florida State's trash. lost again. Duke. Mm, Duke could maybe give them a little bit of trouble, but I doubt Miami would lose that game. And I was meaning to, yeah, Georgia Tech beat Duke, which I actually predicted in the ESPN pick'ems, but I didn't make that one of our pick'ems. Which, by the way, I went 6-4 in the podcast pick'ems for the third week in a row. It's quite frustrating. But then Miami plays Georgia Tech with the infamous game last season. Wake Forest is trash and Syracuse is sneaky. I mean, Syracuse just ended UNLV's undefeated streak, which was a little surprising. But yeah, I'm tired of Miami getting bailed out. It's quite annoying. It's quite frustrating. But I mean, at the end of the day, it is what it is. And at the end of the day, Cal should have stopped them. That's also true. But the real question is, where do these teams go from here? Where does Alabama go from here? Where does Tennessee, go from here? Because it kind of puts into perspective the rest of their schedule, and it makes you think differently about them and their schedule. Obviously, Alabama and Tennessee will play each other. So one of those two is getting another loss, which just makes their losses on Saturday sting even more, because then you get another loss because you have to play each other. And whoever loses that game is looking on the verge of not being in the playoff. Especially if Tennessee, because Tennessee, that loss for Tennessee kills them. It kills them because you still have to play Alabama. Now, luckily, that game's at home, and I think that game is 50-50, to be quite honest. If it was in Tuscaloosa, I would say Alabama for sure wins. But with it being at Tennessee, I'd say it's 50-50. But if Tennessee loses to Bama too, they still have Georgia on their schedule as well, and that's in Athens, where Tennessee has historically not played very well. So this loss to Arkansas could be a killer for Tennessee. I mean, it's kind of a killer anyways. Alabama gets South Carolina next week. I wouldn't be too worried about that one. I think this past weekend should have been a wake-up call, and they're in Tuscaloosa. So I would think that they'll come out with fire and handle their business. Tennessee, they face Florida. I'm glad I ended up going with Florida in my pick for them against UCF, which kind of tells me something else. It kind of tells me, was Colorado's win against UCF really that impressive? Because Florida bullied them as well. And Florida's not good. Just food for thought. Just food for thought. But look, we'll learn everything we need to know about Colorado this weekend when they play Kansas State. That should be a good one for Kansas State. Anyways, but Tennessee has Florida. Again, they're at home. I wouldn't be too worried about that if I'm Tennessee. The Tennessee-Florida game historically has been weird. It seems like the team that shouldn't have won has been winning. But I think Tennessee is a really good team this year. And again, I think the Arkansas game should have been a wake-up call. So I think they'll handle their business. And then Missouri. Who does Missouri play this week? Or are they on a bye? Let's see if I can find their game. I can't find it, so I will look up their schedule. I will look it up. Let's see. They play UMass in the middle of October. Okay, that's a little weird. Because usually SEC teams, they'll have one cupcake on like their second to last game of the season, like Georgia does. Like Georgia has UMass on their second to last game of the season. Like that's a popular thing for SEC teams to do. But in the middle of the season in October is interesting placement. But I mean, and I guess in a way they need it. So, and then they'll have Auburn, and then the game against Bama, and again, just as I talked about how important the Tennessee loss to Arkansas was, Missouri's loss to Texas A&M is important because Missouri still has Alabama on this schedule. Now, in Alabama's case, they're lucky to get that Tennessee game, or actually, sorry, it's at Tennessee, but that Tennessee game. But they're lucky to get the Missouri game at home. But Alabama still has LSU on the schedule, and that's at LSU. They also have to go to Oklahoma. They also have the Iron Bowl on here. And that game, I mean, and you can say all you want. Oh, Auburn's trash. Auburn was trash last year, and and Auburn should have won last year. So I wouldn't worry about the South Carolina game. I obviously wouldn't worry about the Mercer game, but that 3-game stretch of at Tennessee, Missouri, at LSU, that would be worrisome if I'm Alabama. That would be worrisome. Because how confident are you that you will truly get through that unscathed after what you just saw from this team against Vanderbilt? Because who says that the same thing does not happen again, where you go to Tennessee and you beat them? That's because that's going to be a massive game. You go to Tennessee, top 10 matchup, and you beat them. And then you go and play Missouri at home and you sleepwalk and Missouri beats you. Like, who says that doesn't happen? Or who said? Or what about if you beat Tennessee, beat Missouri, and then sleepwalk against LSU? The losses yesterday from Alabama and Tennessee and Missouri put them in vulnerable positions. And look, Georgia's in a vulnerable position too, but at least their loss came to Alabama, a top 10 team. It didn't come to an unranked Vanderbilt, an unranked Arkansas, an unranked Texas A&M. It came to top 10 Alabama. They handled their business against Auburn. I expect them to handle their business against Mississippi State. And yeah, they may lose to Texas, but Texas is the number 1 team in the nation. That wouldn't be a bad loss unless you get just absolutely blown out. But you still also get to prove yourself if you're Georgia because you still have an Ole Miss. You have a Tennessee on your schedule. But I'm excited for the Georgia-Texas game, by the way. That game time and channel got announced. It'll be at 7:30 on ABC on October 19th, which, ironically, I don't know if I'll be home for that game either, just like I wasn't for the Alabama game, which that ended up being best for my mental health, which maybe this will be as well. I don't know. I guess just to talk a little bit about Georgia's game against Auburn. As a Georgia fan, it was a mixed bag for me. It really was. There were things I liked. There were a lot of things that I was not a fan of, obviously, as I stated earlier. I think offensively, I like that the very first drive of the game, we went down and we scored a touchdown right off the bat. I like that. Okay, start fast. The problem is, though, scoring a touchdown on the first possession of the game is great and all, but then we followed up with not a ton. And we didn't score again until I think it was shortly before halftime. I think we went in, 14-3? And then we come out of halftime. Auburn scores a touchdown to make it 14-10, and that was the closest the game ever was. And from that point on, Georgia scored a touchdown in the third quarter, and then went on to score another touchdown and get a field goal in the fourth. So it was a strong fourth quarter from Georgia. But again, it just looked slow at times. The defense played better. Definitely, we were able to set the edge better. There was just some dumb penalties for sure. Peyton Thorne's trash. There's he really is. I didn't love our run defense. Our run defense looked soft. Jarquez Hunter, he was averaging 7 yards a carry, plus he had a TD. So our run defense, in my opinion, wasn't great. Although we did stop Peyton Thorne a lot better than we did last year, which is good. I will continue to say this. Trevor Etienne should continue to get more and more carries. He got 16. I honestly would let him get 20. He looked like the best part of this offense on Saturday. And he's continually looked like the best part of this offense. He's Branson Robinson. Look, I love the guy, but he has looked terrible. Has he gotten more than 5 yards on a carry? The guy had 8 carries for 14 yards. He had not even 2 yards carry. Like, it should be Trevor Etienne, and if we're giving the ball to anyone else, it better be Nate Frazier. Because Nate Frazier looks great with the ball in his hands, too. He looks electric. He was seven carries for 38 yards. Like, I understand you want Branson to be that power back, but the fact of the matter is he is not running over anybody. He's getting stoned at the line every single time. And maybe that's on the offensive line and not him. Maybe. But all I know is when I see Trevor Etienne, Nate Frazier out there, it looks vastly different. And vastly better. Carson did better. He had no interceptions. He was a little rusty once again in the first half, which I just don't understand. This team looks slow coming out the gate every single week. Because after the touchdown, the first possession, it just looked groggy, slow, vanilla. Dylan Bell, or sorry, not Dylan Bell. Colby Young had himself a solid game. London Humphrey had himself a solid game. Dom Lovett got himself a touchdown, which looked accidental, but that's neither here nor there. Auburn continues to lose. They're 2-4, 0-3 in the conference. I don't really know where Auburn goes from here. It's just not good football. Their defense fights, but their offense doesn't help them at all. And I just think if you're Auburn, you've got to just focus on next year at this point. You just got to get through the season and hope that Hugh Freeze can bring in a good quarterback, whether that be recruiting or whether that be the transfer portal. And next year, y'all make something of this team. But it was a crazy week in college football, which like I said, had a feeling was going to happen because usually when it's a weak slate, that leaves room for chaos, as we all know. Ohio State handled their business against I was about to say Ohio State handled their business against Ohio State. They handled their business against Iowa, which do I think Iowa's very good? No. They're unranked. But that defense is no joke, and you could tell because Ohio State came out the gate slow as well. It was a close game at halftime, but then they pulled away in the second half, as you would expect, and it's a good win for Ohio State. It's at least a team that has somewhat of a pulse. Penn State handled their business against UCLA. Uh, I, can I just say the new AP poll I think is a joke. Um, Alabama and Tennessee should have fallen more. Penn State should not be ahead. If you think Penn State's better than Georgia, I have a bridge to sell you. I mean, come on now. Like, are we kidding? Whatever. Whatever. Let's see. Ole Miss handled South Carolina. It's a good bounce back for Ole Miss. Clemson handles their business against Florida State a lot closer than I would have expected. That Florida State defense played well, but that offense is anemic. Iowa State destroys Baylor. I think at this point you have to just say Iowa State's the best team in the Big 12. BYU's in second. And I really like what I'm seeing out of Iowa State. Boise absolutely destroys Utah State. Can I just say, if Ashton Jeanty is not your Heisman favorite, I don't know I don't know what you're doing. I don't know what you're watching. I keep hearing, oh, Travis Hunter, he should be the. What Ashton Jeanty is doing, he is basically carrying Boise State on his back. And you cannot sit here and say, oh, but it's he's doing it against terrible teams. He had over 200 yards against Oregon. Go see if this weekend, Ohio State faces Oregon. Go tell me if Quinshon Judkins has over 200 yards. Go tell me if Travion Henderson has over 200 yards against Oregon. Go tell me. Guarantee you they won't. They probably won't combined have as many yards as Ashton Jeanty had by himself against Oregon. But you're going to tell me it's because he's at Boise in the competition. Okay. You realize he's already at over 1,000 yards rushing, and that the next person close to him is like 400 yards back. Like, do you realize that? SMU continues to look solid. They beat Louisville. Louisville continues to look disappointing. Indiana handles their business against Northwestern. Indiana is just rolling through. And who knows? Their game against Ohio State late in the season could be interesting. We'll see. But this Indiana team is not one you want to mess around with. Wisconsin destroys Purdue. Purdue's just terrible. They need something. They're terrible. Virginia beats Boston College. Woo. I do like the bounce back from Virginia, though. I mean, I think are they 4-1? I think they're 4-1, 5-1, something like that. Impressive bounce back from Virginia this year. North Carolina loses again. Pitt undefeated. Who would have thought? Sure, certainly not me. I thought they were going to be one of the lesser teams in the ACC, but I clearly was wrong. If you want any other indication about how Tennessee's win over NC State was not impressive, you know who beat NC State this weekend? Wake Forest, who's awful. If that tells you anything, just a little shout out here to the armed forces, Navy and Army, both undefeated. Can you believe that? I mean, I think we should set a law. If whatever team or teams end Army and Navy's undefeated streak, they should be deported because they are un-American. Plain and simple. Let's see. Tulane drops a 70 bomb on UAB. Trent Dilfer, woof. Let's see. Anything else interesting? Virginia Tech handles Stanford. Let's see. Oh, look at this. Look at this score. This is such a Nebraska versus Rutgers score. 14-7. I mean, Rutgers, you can't lose. You can't only score 7. If you would have told me, oh, Nebraska only scored 14, I would have been like, oh, Rutgers wins. No, that did not happen. Florida handles UCF. I know it was only 24-13, but honestly, there was never a point where I thought Florida was losing. I was about to say Kentucky. Kansas continues to be disappointing, losing to Arizona State by 4. Duke gets their first loss of the season against Georgia Tech, 24-14. And Texas Tech picks up a good win against Arizona. Texas Tech being a little bit of a surprising team this year. They've been solid, a good bounce back season. Arizona's been disappointing. Arizona's been very up and down. Very up and down. It's hard to kind of predict what Arizona you're going to get week to week. But that was week 6. Yeah, week 6 of college football. We are on to week 7. I will be going over week 7 on Friday. I'll be giving my picks on Friday. And I'm once again excited for week 7. If week 6 was any indication, week 7, maybe we'll see more chaos. Who knows? Ohio State, Oregon's the big game. I'll have my pick. I'll go over that game. And I kind of have an idea of who I'm going to pick. But I'll probably thinking about it a little bit more as well. Obviously, before the season, I had said that I was thinking that Ohio State was going to lose to Oregon at Oregon in the regular season and then avenge that loss to the Big Ten championship. I will tell you if I still think that on Friday. And if anything has changed, I'll tell you why and what specifically has changed. But we'll get to that on Friday. Thank you for listening, and please have a great day.